The footsteps in the forest. Mike Johnson was an ordinary farmer from the village, in his 40s, living a tough life. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him alone to care for his young daughter. People in the village liked him because he was honest and hardworking, but they also knew he was stubborn. Once he set his mind on something, nothing could change it. To make a living, Mike would go up the mountain almost every day to chop wood. The elders in the village always said the mountain wasn't clean, especially the old forest near the mountainside. It was full of strange rumors. The old folks said there were unclean things lurking in that forest, and you definitely shouldn't spend the night there, especially during a rainstorm. Mike, though an honest man, didn't put much stock in what the old folks said. He'd grown up in the village and had been up the mountain countless times. Besides running into wild boars or wolves, he had never seen anything out of the ordinary. Early morning on the mountain. It was a hot summer day. The sun had been blazing down since morning, and the air was so stifling it felt like an oven. Mike woke up early, grabbed his axe and rope, and prepared to head up the mountain to chop some wood. He gently stroked his daughter's hair, watching her sleep peacefully, and sighed. His child was still young, and the family was poor. He needed to earn more money to give her a better life. As he stepped out of his house, he passed by the village's old well and ran into some of the elders. Seeing him with his tools, they knew he was heading up the mountain, and quickly tried to stop him. Mike, the weather feels off today. You shouldn't go up the mountain. The sky looks like it's about to turn nasty, and there are unclean things up there you should stay away from. Mike smiled at them and said, it's nothing. All those stories we told for years, we never seen anything strange up there. The elders shook their heads, sighing, knowing they couldn't change his mind. Mike waved to them, and continued on his way up the mountain. As he walked along the path behind the village, sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patches of light on the ground, like forest spirits dancing. The wind rustled through the trees, birds chirped now and then, and Mike felt unusually relaxed. Strange happenings in the forest. As Mike ventured deeper into the forest, the temperature dropped noticeably. The tall trees blocked out the sun, making it hard for the light to penetrate the dense canopy. Only dim patches of light could be seen on the forest floor. Mike began to feel a strange, oppressive atmosphere, as if something unseen was watching him from the shadows. The deeper he went, the quieter the forest became. The usual sounds of birds were absent, leaving only the crunching of fallen leaves underfoot. He felt as if there were eyes on him, but every time he turned to look, there was nothing there. The wind carried a slight chill, making him shiver. What's with this place today? It feels off, Mike muttered to himself, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. He kept walking, but the sense of unease lingered, growing stronger with each step. He started chopping wood, each stroke of his axe echoing through the silent forest. But alongside the sound of the axe striking wood, he thought he could hear something else, a faint whisper, almost too quiet to be real. It sounded far away, yet at the same time, as if it was Rig HT next to him. Who's there? Mike suddenly stopped, and looked around, his voice breaking the silence. But there was no answer, only the eerie stillness of the forest. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. I'm just hearing things, he thought, trying to focus on his work. But the unease in his heart wouldn't go away, no matter how much he tried to ignore it. Time flew by without him noticing. When he finally looked up, he saw that the sun was already setting. He had chopped enough wood for the day, so he started bundling it up to head back home. Just as he was about to tie up the last bundle, he smelled something familiar yet repulsive. Blood. The scent wasn't strong, but it lingered in the damp air, like a warning. Mike's heart skipped a beat as he looked around, trying to find the source of the smell, but there was nothing out of place. This place is seriously creepy, he muttered under his breath, feeling an ominous sense of dread. He quickly tied up the wood, eager to leave the forest as soon as possible. The storm in the abandoned cabin. Just as Mike was about to start down the mountain, the sky suddenly darkened. In the distance, thick clouds gathered, and the rumble of thunder echoed through the air. The clouds rolled in quickly, blotting out the last of the daylight. The air turned stifling, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Moments later, rain began to pour down in torrents, drenching Mike before he had time to react. He hurriedly finished tying up the wood and slung it over his shoulder, planning to brave the storm and head down the mountain. The rain beat against his face like needles, stinging his skin. He wiped his face with his sleeve, but it was useless. The rain was relentless. The rain was so heavy that the path quickly turned into a muddy mess. His vision blurred, and he slipped several times as he tried to make his way down. The forest around him swayed in the wind, the trees creaking ominously, as if they might snap at any moment. Just as he began to despair, he remembered the old abandoned cabin halfway down the mountain, a place where woodcutters used to rest. He decided to take shelter there until the rain eased up. The cabin was hidden deep in the woods, surrounded by towering trees. The small building was falling apart, its door and windows hanging on by a thread, and the thatched roof was barely intact. Mike hurried to the cabin, pushing open the creaky door as he stumbled inside. The smell of rot hit him immediately, making him gag. The inside of the cabin was dim and damp. In the corners, piles of rotting straw and broken wood were strewn about. Mike set his bundle of wood down and leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. As he looked around, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. But he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The air inside the cabin was thick with the smell of mold, mixed with the scent of decaying wood and something else, a faint, metallic smell that made his stomach churn. As he glanced around, he noticed what looked like dark, dried stains on the floor in the corner. Old blood. A shiver ran down his spine, and that uneasy feeling from earlier washed over him again. He thought about leaving, but the rain was coming down too hard outside. The rain pounded on the roof of the cabin, a relentless, rhythmic thudding that made the walls tremble. The wind howled outside, and the thunder rumbled, shaking the tiny cabin. Mike pulled his soaked clothes tighter around himself, trying to fend off the chill that had settled in his bones. Before he knew it, the sky had darkened completely, but the storm showed no signs of letting up. Mike knew he couldn't stay here all night. It would only get more dangerous as time went on. He decided to make a break for it, and get off the mountain before things got worse. He grabbed his bundle of wood, pushed open the door, and stepped out into the storm. The eerie footsteps. Mike struggled through the rain, his clothes sticking to his skin as he trudged along the slippery path. The rain continued to pour down, drumming on his head and shoulders, making it hard to hear anything else. The trees around him swayed violently in the wind, their branches awing at the sky. But as he moved through the forest, he heard something that made his blood run cold, a set of faint, soft footsteps following closely behind him. They were barely audible over the storm, but Mike could hear them, matching his own steps perfectly. His heart raced as he came to an abrupt stop, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped too. He spun around, but all he saw was the dark, rain-soaked forest. No one was there. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly despite his attempt to sound brave. But the only answer was the relentless sound of rain hitting the ground. A chill ran down his spine. It felt like something, or someone, was right behind him, breathing down his neck. He tried to shrug it off, telling himself it was just his imagination, but the feeling wouldn't go away. He began to walk faster, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. But the footsteps behind him quickened too, keeping pace with him perfectly. No matter how fast he went, they were always right there, just a step behind. Mike's fear grew with every step. He didn't dare look back again, he was too afraid of what he might see. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, and every shadow seemed to reach out for him. It felt like he was running from a nightmare he couldn't escape. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He knew something was following him, something he couldn't see, but could feel deep in his bones. It was something far more terrifying than any wild animal or bandit. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, drowning out the storm. His legs were starting to give out from the strain, but he couldn't stop. He knew that if he did, whatever was following him would catch up. Damn this unclean thing, he cursed under his breath, trying to keep his wits about him. But the footsteps grew louder, closer, until he could almost feel the presence right behind him, its breath cold on his neck. He finally couldn't take it anymore. He whipped around, expecting to see something horrific, but there was nothing, just the empty, rain-soaked forest. The realization that nothing was there, and yet the footsteps persisted, nearly drove him mad. Mike was at his breaking point. He didn't know what was after him, but he knew it was something beyond his understanding, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. The cabin's secret. Mike finally stumbled back into the village, his legs giving out beneath him, as he crashed through his front door. He was soaked to the bone, his face pale with terror. His young daughter saw the state he was in and ran to get help from the neighbors. Barely coherent, Mike babbled about being chased by something unclean. He said the footsteps had followed him the entire way, like they were trying to drag him down into the earth. The neighbors were disturbed by his ramblings, but tried to calm him down, insisting that he must been frightened by the storm. They said the muddy ground had probably stuck to his shoes, causing him to hear strange sounds. But Mike couldn't shake the fear. He knew deep down that it wasn't just mud, or his imagination. He had felt something malevolent, something that was out to get him. In the days that followed, he became more and more withdrawn, afraid to go back into the forest. He stayed inside, his eyes constantly darting around the room, as if expecting something to jump out at him. Then one night, Mike suddenly shot out of bed, his eyes wide with terror, staring at the door. He started muttering to himself, "It's here, it's here," then he grabbed a knife, and began slashing at the air, screaming that the unclean thing was coming for him. His daughter, terrified, ran to the neighbors again, begging them to help. They hurried to get the village's exorcist, hoping to rid Mike of whatever was haunting him. But by the time they returned, Mike was lying on the floor, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, still whispering, "It's here, it's here." The tragic end. The next morning, the villagers found Mike's body in a deserted field just outside the village. His face was frozen in an expression of pure horror, his eyes wide open, as if he had seen something unspeakable before he died. The villagers were terrified, no one dared go near his body. The exorcist examined him but found no signs of injury or foul play, only that he had died of sheer terror. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said Mike had been scared to death by the unclean thing that haunted the mountain, while others believed he had gone mad. After that, no one in the village dared go up the mountain alone, especially not at night or in the rain. The aftermath. Mike's daughter was haunted by nightmares after his death. In her dreams, she saw her father standing in a pitch-black forest, his back turned to her. She would try to reach him, but every time she got close, he would turn around and disappear into the darkness. When she woke, he would hear the sound of footsteps, faint but unmistakable, as if they were coming closer with each passing night. The village was soon filled with whispers about the unclean thing that stalked the mountain, preying on those foolish enough to wander alone. On stormy nights, villagers claimed they could hear the sound of footsteps near the old cabin, as if the unclean thing was searching for its next victim. Mike's story became a cautionary tale, told by the elders to scare the children and keep them from wandering too far from the village. But no one knew the true horror that lingered in his daughter's heart, the knowledge that the footsteps had never truly left. Every night, when the village was silent, she could still hear them, pacing outside her door, waiting for her to answer.